Thanks, Ted. I don't think I've ever been introduced that way before. That was awesome. Thank you. It is a pleasure to be here with you guys today. I feel like I'm in a room full of kindred spirits. That doesn't always happen, and so I'm really looking forward to today, and I'm flattered that Greg asked me if I'd kick this off. I thought maybe I'd take the time to start a little bit about the why. There's going to be a lot of technology, I suspect, today that's talked about. I'll talk about a little bit of it, but I wanted to spend the time framing up why autonomy is important, why we're interested in it, why we need to work on it, why we need to deliver it, why it needs to happen in order for the world to be a better place. And it starts here. No surprise to anybody, the global population of the world is continuing to grow. There's 8 billion souls on the planet today. We're headed to a place where 2 more billion are going to be here in the not too distant future, and that's the fundamental challenge, I think, of our time. Those people are going to consume more things than we do today. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a separate slide, but fundamentally, they're going to consume more things because diets are becoming better across the planet. That's a really good thing for us. It generally means lifespans are increasing and the health of people is generally improving, but it also means that we don't just have to produce a proportional amount of food for 8 billion to go to 10 billion. We need to actually increase that amount of food production by about 50% in order to keep up not just with the pace of population growth, but the increasing component of proteins and other things that humans need in their diets. That's the challenge on the food side of things. If you don't believe that the world's population is growing, for those of you that are steeped in data, I threw this chart in. This is the population from 1950 to 2024. I would suggest it's a pretty good trend. Short of a black swan event, natural disasters, those sorts of things, our population on the planet is going to increase. Disproportionately, that's going to happen in Southeast Asia primarily, but generally speaking across the globe, we're going to be faced with a higher demand for all the things that humans need than what we have today. It's not just about food, though. I think this is important in particular right now as we think about agriculture and we think about where commodity prices are and what's on the top of mind for growers today. Frankly, it's not autonomy. It's the price of corn, the price of soybeans, sugar beets, et cetera, and so on. And I think we ought to think about agriculture a little bit differently maybe than just the food that we produce. I think we need to think about it in the context of the energy that's consumed by people on the planet. This chart is the average energy usage per person, per capita, across the world in different countries, and then you can see the world chart at the bottom from 1965 to 2024, to last year. Humans are generally consuming more energy than they have historically. That's disproportionately happening in non-developed countries as they become more developed. And it's interesting to note that those countries tend to be where the largest population exists, right? You think of 1.3 billion people in China, and they've more than doubled their energy consumption per capita in the last 20 years. You think about India, doubled also 1.4 billion people in that country. 30% of the world's population has doubled their energy consumption per person in the last 20 years. And I'd suggest to you that agriculture plays an important role in meeting that future demand. There's an ethanol plant not very far from here, maybe 2 miles north of here. That's an example of agriculture meeting the energy demand. It's not the only example, but it's an important one. And I think we need to start to think about agriculture as perhaps the world's best, most efficient battery. There are very few things, I think, that are more efficient and effective at storing energy than a corn plant or a soybean plant or a wheat plant that takes the sun's power, the energy from the sun, chemical energy from the ground, and captures it in the form of protein, fiber, carbohydrates, starches, the things that we can then turn into more useful forms potentially of energy for human consumption. And I think as we think about autonomy today, I think we ought to think about it in the context of this growing world population to continue to produce the food that people need, but also, just as importantly, the energy that we consume when we drive our cars or pickup trucks, when we turn the light switch on in the house, when we do the things that contribute to making our life and our experience here better than the generation before. Because that growing world population is going to experience an improved quality of life in addition to an improved diet. So I think that's the context. The demand is going to be significant for the things that agriculture produces. The bad news is that the world's population that participates directly in agriculture is continuing to decrease. This is just a chart from about when John Deere was founded 188 years ago to 2015. And this is a percentage of the population in these different places around the world that participate in agriculture. Today in the U.S., about 1.5% of the world's population, or of the U.S. population, participates directly in the production of agricultural commodities. 1.5%. If you rewound the clock 70 years ago, that number would have been 60%. 60% of this group would have been directly producing food for themselves and for others. The only reason that you're not doing that today is because agriculture has become incredibly efficient in this country, and it's released the population of the country to go do lots of other things. To create cell phones, to put people on the surface of the moon, to put satellites into orbit, to create the computers that we use today. The current state of things in the world, I would argue, is directly attributed to the ability of agriculture to release millions of people to go do lots of other things that are useful for the species on the planet. And that is a miracle. It's an amazing thing. And we should be super, super excited about that moving forward. But the challenge is there's just fewer people that are living in rural locations that are available to the agricultural industry. And that's not just a phenomenon that's happening in the United States. It's happening in all these other countries as well, to a lesser degree, perhaps, to a lesser magnitude, but the trends are all in the same direction. And that's the challenge. How do we continue to meet the energy needs and the food needs of a growing world population with fewer people available to do it? In Deere terms, we would call that, how do we enable people to do more with less? And I think autonomy is the answer to that question on the farm. I am super excited about the opportunity to talk a little bit about that today and to hear how others are thinking about it. If you look at just the U.S. farm population, the average age of the farmer is 58 years old. They're going to work 12 to 18 hours a day, and they're going to have to find 2.4 million labor hours every year. That's the task today. These are hard jobs. They're long hours, and it's a difficult thing to find 2.4 million labor hours every year to go get the work done that we all need to live the quality of lives that we have. Autonomy, from a Deere perspective, is about taking the opportunity to have the operator step out of the cab of the machine. Not forcing them to do that necessarily. We still leave the cab on the machine because there's a lot of jobs that our equipment does that today are not going to be done autonomously. And there's many operators that still want to operate those machines. There's a certain amount of enjoyment, if you've ever been in the seat of a tractor, that you get from being able to operate that equipment. But we want to give them the ability to choose whether or not they're in the cab of that machine. And we want to give them the connectivity to that piece of equipment so that they can have confidence that the job that it's doing, whatever the job is being done well and to their satisfaction. So there's this digital component, this connectivity piece to that piece of equipment that is just as important has the ability to take the human out of the operator station altogether. For us, it's required the development of a perception system, primarily. We've been on a track for 25 years, I would argue, long predating me and the other John Deere folks, many of them in the room, to improve the automation of the equipment to the point that a customer, a grower, is in a position to ask us, why do I still have to be in the cab of this machine? And I think we're there now. The final piece for us is replacing the perception system that's been in that machine for forever, the human eyes, the human brain, with the ability to detect the environment around the machine and make good decisions about what that machine should do next, whether that's raising or lowering an implement or avoiding an obstacle in the field, routing around that obstacle, or deciding that I can't go through this particular wet spot in the field. That's where we're at today. We've been working on this, and we think about it in the context of applying the technology to the broad field population of tractors, in this case, that are out there, not just on new equipment. Meaning we want to be able to take this new technology and put it on older products so that lots of customers, lots of growers can benefit from the technology, not just a customer that might buy a new machine. We do that with a perception system that's largely based on visual information. We use a camera array around the top of the machine to give us both object identification as well as distance or ranging to those objects. Very similar to how your eyes would work from a human perspective. And we do that because we think the visual information is the richest form of information. If you think about a human in the cab of that machine, the dominant sense that the human's using is their sense of sight, the ability to see what's around them. And we're well on our way with developing this autonomous kit. We've got a machine actually that's running at Big Iron today, I think, as well, if you're interested in seeing it. And we've been working on this for the last 4 or 5 years, the last 2 or 3 with growers right here in the Castleton area, to make sure that when this technology is deployed on the farm, that it's easy to use, that customers understand how it functions, and that they can start to create value with it nearly immediately. The technology is changing over time, and this is another important dimension that I'm sure you're going to hear a lot about today. It's changing rapidly, both the sensing modalities, in our case, the imaging devices that we would use, and how many pixels, the resolution of those imaging devices that we utilize in the perception system, as well as the compute, the ability to take those pixels and understand what they are and make decisions from them. If you think about just the last 3 years for us, this is the change that's happened in the perception system just from the hardware elements alone, not taking into account the algorithms that I'll talk about in a minute. The reason that this is important is it opens up new applications for us. The distance that we can perceive around the machine has a direct relationship to how fast that machine can move in the field safely, and how broad of an implement, how wide of an implement that machine can potentially pull in the field. And in the last 3 years, we've managed to go from 16 to 24 meters of perception capability. I would forecast that to change on a similar trend over the next 2 to 3 years, just as a function of how the technology is changing in both cameras and in terms of compute. So our ability to go faster and to do more with wider implements is going to continue to increase. It's not just for broad acres. I brought in this almond application as an example, and we're going to hear at the end of this. I'll bookend the discussion with a bit of feedback from another customer that works in almonds. This is an almond application in the Central Valley of California. In this particular application, you're going to run 10 hours a day. You go at 2.5 miles an hour. That's excruciatingly slow. Walking speed, excruciatingly slow. And you're going to do this application in almonds 6 to 8 times a year. So if you ever eat an almond, remember that. There's an incredible amount of work that went into creating that almond. And you're going to do this across all the almond acres that sit in the Central Valley of California over and over and over again. And that's one crop. That's almonds. It doesn't include walnuts. It doesn't include the other tree nuts. Doesn't include citrus. They're incredibly labor-intensive crops And today there's a human in the cab of those mid-sized tractors doing this over and over and over again. In case you're not familiar with it, the application is blast spraying. So this is an autonomous blast spraying tractor. It's pulling a blast sprayer behind it. That's the implement. And its job is to shoot a crop protectant up into the air, 40, 50, 60 feet, and have it settle back down on the trees. This is fungicide, generally speaking. It's the crop protectants that are necessary to produce the perfect fruit or the perfect nut in whatever orchard it happens to be in. It's extremely labor intensive, but it's also a different application than the broadacre fields that we see outside the door. This particular application is problematic for us because it includes branches that overhang the machine. When these almond orchards get mature and the trees are large, we no longer have line of sight to the sky. And if we don't have line of sight to the sky to the tractor, we no longer have a reliable GPS signal. We no longer know where that machine is within the rows. And so we had to go solve that problem with additional sensor modalities. This is a video image of what the sensors on this particular tractor are seeing as that machine is traversing through the almond orchard. You can see the circles that are denoted there in the video are actually the trunks of the trees as the machine is driving. We assess where those are with a sensor called a LiDAR, shooting lasers out at high frequencies and measuring the reflectivity of those things coming back to the sensor. And that helps us locate within the row of trees where that particular machine is at. And then once it exits the row of trees, we have the ability to use GPS again because we're no longer under the canopy of the tree, and we can get a ground truth on where we're at before we enter the next row of trees. Different application, I would argue the same problem. Highly labor intensive, super important for humans to figure out a way to solve this problem so that we can continue to grow the almonds and the citrus and the other things that are high value crops that we all come to know and appreciate. But it takes a different sensing capability and a different sensor modality to do it. And I suspect over the course of the next several presentations, you're going to see a lot more of those differences. I do think there's this natural question of, well, why do you have to have the cab on the machine? We made an acquisition about a month ago of a company called GUS, Global Unmanned Spraying Systems. And GUS is a pretty good forecast into the future, I think. In this particular spraying application in high-value crops, this machine would be used in place of that mid-sized tractor and blast sprayer as a dedicated spraying outfit. All this machine does is spray. And in this particular application, that's actually a pretty useful thing to have a dedicated machine if you have enough acres to justify it. I think eventually autonomy moves in this direction. I think it happens slowly. I think it happens in incremental steps that eventually the operator station may disappear altogether. We shouldn't be in a hurry to do that. There's going to be a lot of opportunity lost and flexibility lost on the farm if we move to that too quickly. But in certain applications, it's the right thing to do. And I think in this application in particular it is. And I think this is a glimpse into the future of what might happen in other job steps on other farms. I'm going to talk just briefly about a little bit of a few technology trends that I think are important. And this is, my formal education was in artificial intelligence, but a very long time ago, back when it wasn't cool or nearly as lucrative as it probably is today. And so this is just a little history lesson on what's happened with respect to artificial intelligence algorithms over the last, I'll call it 15 years or so. We started over here on the left-hand side with support vector machines as algorithms in 2010, 2011, 2012, and they were super limited in what they could do. It was a frustrating time to be involved in artificial intelligence because the problems you could solve were fundamentally simple, and you had to ask yourself the question, why am I trying to solve this at all? Because a human can do this much better, much more efficiently, much more effectively. We transitioned to something called convolutional neural networks, which are still in use today. We have John Deere has those in production in our See and Spray applications, as well as in some of the autonomous applications. And they were a giant step forward for us. They gave us the ability from an algorithm perspective to be able to do much finer and more resolute decision making on available data sets. But they were, and still are, computationally hungry. And so we had to bring the computational capability on the machines along for the ride in order to be able to run those algorithms on the edge in machines. The models that we run today are on the far right-hand side of this. They're transformer networks. If you've used ChatGPT, you've used a transformer network, maybe unknowingly. And they're super compelling. They're super interesting. They're still computationally expensive. They're still data hungry, but they are incredibly good at generalizing. And so we're super excited about what the opportunity space is for transformer networks moving forward to help us do a better job of assessing what's happening on the farm through the eyes and the ears and whatever else might be on an autonomous tractor, making sense of that information and then making good decisions from it. But they also have another use case, I think, on the farm, and that is in the data that's been collected on the farms, the agronomic data that's been collected on the farms for the better part of a decade and stored in things like Operations Center. That data contains insights to whatever farmer's operation it came from that are difficult for us to unpack. You need to be a data scientist in many cases to unpack the insights from it. I do think transformer networks moving forward are going to give us the ability to unlock some of those insights and help growers make better decisions as we think about the future of farming. I also wanted to talk a little bit about how these different applications make one another better. So I showed two applications around an almond spraying application and a broadacre tillage application, and you might be tempted to think those two things are very different and they're mostly unrelated, and that's sort of true, but the reality is for many of these algorithms, the data that is collected in one application is helpful in another application. I'll give you an example. We don't encounter a lot of trees in our broadacre data. When we have a 8R or 9R doing tillage in one of these fields, they don't see a tree very often, especially in North Dakota. But the machines that are operating in almond orchards see trees all the time. That's sort of the point. And so we can take that tree data from an almond orchard and use it in our broadacre tillage data to make that broadacre machine better at sensing trees. The converse is also true. This ability to generalize these models across all the different use cases in agriculture is fundamentally made better by our ability to collect data, collect the image information in this case to train the networks, in all of these different applications. A farm in California can make a farm in North Dakota better, and the opposite is also true. I'm going to end with a video of a customer that's the same customer actually that we would have had at the Consumer Electronics Show, and he's an almond orchard customer in California. But his name's Russell, and I enjoy Russell. I enjoy working with Russell and putting technology to use on Russell's farm. He's been a great advocate for autonomy. He's been one of our first pilot use cases for autonomy in almond orchards. But I think the reason I'm playing this video is I think it's an appropriate bookend to the challenge that I tried to paint up front, and hearing that come through directly, the voice of the customer, is, I think, important, and also he says it much more eloquently than I would.
The feeling I have when I walk down my fields is pride. I walk these fields every day. To see a crop grow is inspirational. Every year, I grow about 10 million pounds of almonds, walnuts, and pistachios. My name is Russell Michael. I'm a tree nut farmer in Northern California. Growing walnuts and almonds and pistachios is a complex job. It's ever changing. You have to stay up on top of new technology. During harvest, it's not uncommon for me to work 14 to 18-hour days. Never in my life did I expect an autonomous tractor to exist. I was of the age starting to farm where we had no cell phones. So to make the leap from no cell phones to being able to control a tractor from my phone is like, that you could physically see where this tractor is on an app, watch its production, start it, stop it, see it in the field, driving down the row, doing its job. This is exciting. I mean, I think it's going to be exciting for the entire farming community. Autonomy will change how we do things in farming, strengthen what we have in getting operations done in the field on a routine basis without the complexity of having employees manage driving tractors and training them how to drive tractors. You will be able to program a tractor to do an operation my way. I can make that tractor go where I want it to go for my reasons. Future of autonomy is just going to explode once we see the efficacy of autonomous tractors in the orchard. People will adopt this as their routine. 20 years ago, I would not have believed it. It's going to change everything.
It is going to change everything. I hope we have an awesome day today. I'm looking forward to the rest of the day. Thank you for your time.